The C-130 military transport plane touched down at Andrews Air Force Base on a cold November morning. I was finally home after 18 months deployed in Afghanistan, but I wasn't the same man who had left. As I sat in my wheelchair waiting to disembark, I looked down at where my legs used to be, both amputated below the knee after an IED explosion that nearly killed me. The physical pain had mostly subsided, replaced by phantom sensations that my therapist said might never go away. But nothing could have prepared me for the emotional devastation waiting for me at home. My name is David Hutchinson, and I had been a sergeant in the U.S. Army for 6 years when that roadside bomb changed everything. I met my wife, Nicole, when we were both 21, just after I enlisted. She was working as a dental hygienist, beautiful and full of life, with dreams of living a comfortable suburban existence. She knew what she was signing up for when she married a soldier, or at least I thought she did. We had 3 years of marriage before my deployment, 3 years that seemed happy enough. We had bought a modest house in a quiet neighborhood, talked about starting a family once I returned, and made plans for the future. During my deployment, Nicole sent letters and care packages regularly for the first few months. She'd write about missing me, about how proud she was, about counting down the days until I came home. But around month 6, the communications became less frequent. Her emails grew shorter, more distant. Video calls became awkward, filled with long silences and forced conversation. I attributed it to the strain of separation. Many military marriages face these challenges. I never imagined what was really happening back home. The IED hit our convoy on what was supposed to be a routine patrol. I remember the flash, the deafening explosion, and then waking up days later in a military hospital in Germany. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive. 3 of my brothers in arms hadn't made it. They explained the extent of my injuries. Both legs severely damaged, requiring amputation. Internal injuries. Shrapnel wounds. Traumatic brain injury that, thankfully, seemed to have minimal lasting cognitive effects. I spent 2 months in recovery and rehabilitation in Germany before being stable enough for transport home. I had called Nicole from the hospital to tell her about my injuries. Her reaction was strange, not the concern and support I expected, but a kind of cold shock. She asked technical questions about my condition in an almost clinical way, like she was taking inventory of damaged goods. She didn't cry or express relief that I was alive. She just asked about the extent of my disabilities and when I'd be coming home. I chalked it up to her being in shock, unable to process the news. I was wrong. My parents met me at the airbase, and I could see the mixture of relief and heartbreak in their eyes. My mother cried when she saw me in the wheelchair, but she held me tight and told me how grateful she was that I was alive. My father, a Vietnam veteran himself, gripped my hand firmly and said, "You're home now, son. That's all that matters." I asked where Nicole was, and my parents exchanged an uncomfortable glance. My mother said she was waiting at the house, that she wanted to see me privately first. The drive home was surreal. Everything looked the same but felt different. My street, my neighborhood, my house. All exactly as I'd left them, but I was viewing them from an entirely new perspective, literally and figuratively. When we pulled into the driveway, I saw Nicole standing on the lawn, arms crossed, watching the car approach. Even from a distance, I could see the expression on her face wasn't one of joy or relief. It was something closer to dread. My father helped me into my wheelchair. I was still learning to use it efficiently, and I rolled myself toward my wife. I tried to smile, tried to be the optimistic soldier who just wanted to embrace his wife after 18 months apart. "Nicole," I said, my voice catching with emotion. "I'm home. I'm finally home." She didn't move toward me. She didn't smile. She just stood there, looking at me and the wheelchair with barely concealed disgust. "We need to talk," she said flatly. Those 4 words, delivered in that tone, made my blood run cold. My parents sensed the tension and quickly excused themselves, saying they'd wait inside. The moment they were gone, Nicole's mask dropped completely. She told me she couldn't do this. She didn't sign up to be a caregiver. She was 28 years old and wasn't going to spend her life taking care of a cripple. Yes, she used that word. She said she wanted a husband who could provide for her, protect her, give her children, and live a normal life. I wasn't that person anymore. I sat there in my wheelchair, on my own lawn, still wearing my military uniform, and listened to my wife of 4 years tell me I was useless to her now. She said she had consulted with a lawyer while I was in recovery in Germany. She had already drafted divorce papers. She wanted the house, said she deserved it after putting up with being a military wife. She wanted half of my disability benefits, my VA compensation, anything she could legally claim. She had it all planned out. The betrayal was more painful than losing my legs. I had given everything for my country, nearly died serving, and the woman I loved couldn't even look at me with compassion. Through tears, yes, I cried. I asked her if there was someone else. She hesitated for just a moment too long before denying it. That's when I knew. There was someone else. While I was bleeding in the desert, fighting for my life, she had been building a new life without me. I refused to sign the papers that day. I told her if she wanted a divorce, she'd have to file for it properly and we'd do everything through lawyers. I wasn't going to make it easy for her to abandon a disabled veteran. She moved out that night, going to stay with her parents, though I suspected she was actually staying with whoever this other man was. My parents moved in temporarily to help me adjust to being home and navigating the house in a wheelchair. The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's appointments, physical therapy sessions, and meetings with my lawyer. Nicole did file for divorce, and as expected, she asked for everything. She wanted the house, alimony, a share of my military benefits, and even tried to claim that my PTSD, which I hadn't been formally diagnosed with yet, made me a danger to her, hoping to strengthen her case. Her lawyer was aggressive, painting me as a broken, unstable veteran who couldn't provide for himself, let alone a spouse. But Nicole made several critical mistakes. First, she underestimated me. She thought that because I was physically disabled, I was mentally defeated too. She couldn't have been more wrong. Second, she got greedy. Her demands were so excessive and her justifications so flimsy that even the judge seemed put off during preliminary hearings. And third, she didn't cover her tracks as well as she thought. I hired a private investigator, a former army buddy who specialized in this kind of work. Within 2 weeks, he had documented evidence of Nicole's affair. It had started 7 months into my deployment with a man named Derek, a pharmaceutical sales rep she met at the dental office where she worked. He drove a BMW, took her to expensive restaurants, and had been staying at our house, the house I was paying the mortgage on, while I was bleeding for my country overseas. The investigator got photos, credit card records, even testimony from neighbors who had seen this man's car in our driveway regularly. But I wanted more than just proof of infidelity. I wanted justice. I started digging into Nicole's activities during my deployment. I discovered she had been using the joint credit card I had given her for emergencies to fund her lifestyle with Derek. Expensive dinners, weekend trips, shopping sprees. She had racked up nearly $30,000 in debt that was technically in both our names. I had been sending most of my combat pay home, thinking she was saving it for our future. Instead, she was spending it on her affair. I also discovered that she had been collecting benefits as a military spouse, including dependent housing allowance and family separation allowance, while carrying on her affair. What she didn't realize was that military spousal benefits come with certain expectations and legal requirements. Adultery while receiving military dependent benefits can have serious legal consequences, especially when fraud is involved. My lawyer was ex-military himself, and when I showed him everything I'd found, a smile crossed his face. "She really screwed up," he said. "We're not just going to win this divorce case, we're going to make sure she faces consequences for what she's done." We built our case carefully, documenting everything, preparing for battle. The divorce trial was brutal. Nicole showed up in conservative clothes, playing the part of the devoted wife who just couldn't handle the burden of caring for a disabled husband. Her lawyer portrayed her as a victim, a young woman whose dreams had been shattered by war. They tried to paint me as unstable, depressed, and incapable of being a proper husband. They claimed she deserved compensation for her sacrifice. Then we presented our evidence. The affair, thoroughly documented with dates, photos, and credit card statements. The financial fraud, showing how she'd spent the money I sent home and maxed out our credit cards on her boyfriend. Testimony from neighbors about Derek's regular presence at our home. phone records showing thousands of calls and texts between them, starting just weeks after I deployed. The courtroom went silent as we laid it all out. I watched Nicole's face go pale, then red, as the evidence mounted. Her lawyer objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed most of it. When it came time for me to testify, I wheeled myself to the stand and told my story calmly and clearly. I talked about serving my country, about the IED that took my legs, about calling my wife from a hospital bed in Germany only to be treated like a burden. I talked about coming home to find not the comfort of a loving spouse, but a woman who called me useless and handed me divorce papers on my own lawn. I didn't play the victim. I didn't ask for pity. I simply stated facts and let the evidence speak for itself. When my lawyer asked me what I wanted from this divorce, I said, "I want what's fair, Your Honor. I want to keep the house I paid for while serving my country. I want to be free from the debt she incurred during her affair. And I want her to face consequences for committing fraud while collecting military-dependent benefits." The judge's ruling was decisive. I got the house. I got to keep all my military benefits without having to share them. Nicole was ordered to pay back the portion of the debt she had fraudulently incurred, the $30,000 she spent on her affair. The judge also referred her case to military authorities for investigation of dependent benefits fraud, which could result in criminal charges and requirements to repay those benefits. But the damage to Nicole's reputation was the real punishment. The details of the case became public record. Her family was mortified. Her friends abandoned her. The dental office where she worked, a practice that prided itself on supporting military families, fired her when they learned what she'd done. Derek, her boyfriend, wanted nothing to do with her once he realized she came with massive debt and legal troubles. She had gambled on securing my assets in divorce and instead lost everything. In the months after the divorce was finalized, I focused on rebuilding my life. I got fitted for prosthetic legs and worked tirelessly in physical therapy until I could walk again. Not perfectly, but well enough to live independently. I went back to school using my GI Bill, earning a degree in business administration. I started a non-profit organization helping disabled veterans transition back to civilian life, using my own experience to guide others through similar struggles. I also started dating again. I met Sarah, a nurse at the VA hospital who had helped with my rehabilitation. She saw past my disabilities to the person I was inside. She admired my service, my determination, and my character. We took things slow, but eventually fell in love. She was everything Nicole wasn't: compassionate, loyal, genuine, and strong. She didn't see my wheelchair or prosthetics as limitations but as evidence of my survival and strength. 2 years after my divorce, Sarah and I got married in a small ceremony attended by my military brothers, family, and friends who had supported me through everything. My house, the one Nicole had tried to take, became our home. We renovated it to be more accessible, added a workshop where I built furniture as a hobby, and eventually welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Hope. Meanwhile, Nicole's life spiraled downward. The debt from the divorce judgment haunted her. She had to file for bankruptcy. She moved back in with her parents in her 30s, unable to afford her own place. She worked a series of low-paying jobs, her career as a dental hygienist effectively over after being fired. The military benefits fraud investigation resulted in her having to repay nearly $50,000 in dependent benefits she had received during my deployment while committing adultery. She would be paying that back for years. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she tried to reach out several times, wanting to apologize or explain or perhaps rekindle something. I never responded. She had made her choice when I needed her most. She had looked at a wounded warrior who had sacrificed for his country and saw only a burden to be discarded. That wasn't someone I wanted in my life, not even as an acquaintance. Did I ruin her? Some people might say what happened to Nicole was her own doing, that she ruined herself through her choices. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't play an active role in making sure she faced consequences. I could have quietly accepted a simple divorce, split things amicably, and moved on. Instead, I made sure every bit of her betrayal was exposed and that she faced the full legal consequences of her actions. Some might judge me for that. They might say I should have been the bigger person, that revenge is hollow, that I should have forgiven and forgotten. But here's what I learned in war and in the aftermath. Actions have consequences, and people who betray those who serve and sacrifice should not be allowed to profit from that betrayal. I didn't ruin Nicole out of petty vindictiveness. I held her accountable for fraud, adultery, and the cruel abandonment of a disabled veteran. Today, I walk on prosthetic legs, run a successful nonprofit, have a loving wife and beautiful daughter, and own my home free and clear. I have a Purple Heart on my wall and the respect of my community. I've turned my tragedy into purpose, helping other wounded warriors navigate the challenges I faced. I'm happy, fulfilled, and at peace with my life. Nicole, from what I hear, is still struggling with debt, working dead-end jobs, and living with the reputation of being the woman who abandoned her wounded veteran husband. She made a calculation that I would be a burden and that she deserved better. She was wrong on both counts. I don't think about her often anymore. When I do, I don't feel anger or satisfaction. I feel nothing. She's a closed chapter in a book I've long since finished reading. My life moved forward without her, and it's a better life than I could have ever had with someone so shallow and cruel. The irony isn't lost on me. She thought my disabilities made me useless, but I've accomplished more as a disabled veteran than she ever will as an able-bodied person. She thought she deserved better than me, but she ended up with far less than she would have had if she just had the decency to stand by her husband when he needed her most. I didn't just survive that IED explosion in Afghanistan. I survived Nicole too. And in the end, that might have been the harder battle. But like every battle I've faced, I came through stronger on the other side.